live. What's going on, man?
I was doing good. How are you doing, man?
Good. Happy, technically episode 5, although 4 didn't make it because technical difficulties.
And two, I think, is still in the works. Yeah, I think we've got some holes.
It's like when you're it's like when we're kickstarting an engine. You know, it's just like sometimes sputters and then going pop. You know, we're getting going though.
Our goal is to strive towards continuity. We're getting there.
We go.
Episode after episode. We're almost there.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a happy Pride weekend, by the way. Here in New York, I was just on the way back from the gym, and it is bustling with humans celebrating. Yeah, hence my colorful shirt. This is the most colorful and flamboyant shirt
there you go.
that I own. So,
I don't know what comedian I was listening to, or late night talk show host, but he was mentioning that there's always pride, some kind of parades or celebrations going on in New York. Has that been kind of your experience where there's always something going down?
Well, especially now, you can see, I mean, the divergence of normal wear to, flamboyant wear, and it's great. It's good. It's really good. But it also comes at an interesting time, with the whole recent, Roe v. Wade abolishment.
So it's like, here we go.
We're selling. Yeah, I know. We don't have to get too deep into it. I know we generally have strayed away from politics and yeah, but it's an interesting time. So there's a lot of, New York's a pretty liberal, obviously, town. So a lot of, my body, my right. And, I don't know. I don't know. Do you have any interest in going down this rabbit hole, or?
There's a couple interesting points that I like to talk about. It'll kind of deviate a little bit, but it'll stay within the realm though.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
All right. Let's see. Let's do a quick poll where we're at. So I think broadly speaking, we can solve the abortion problem right now.
Okay. Let's hear it. Oh yes. I think I know where you're going.
Oh
no.
Well, we'll save that. Yeah, we could cut that. I do have a solution for that. No, it's simple though. It's simple. Dane, let me ask you, Dane, what is your stance on abortion?
I was thinking about that. I'm a little biased. I think coming into this, my mom worked at Planned Parenthood for 3 or 4 years, and so I kind of take after my mom in the point that, like, some human bodies, which is interesting. So my mom's been a nurse midwife for 25 odd years, and we were joking around the other day that humans, especially women, when they become fertile, when they have their first period around age average 13, 14, I want to say, don't quote me on that.
Sure.
I asked, like, what is, how does a body respond? And my mom says the bodies are so small, they have a hard time delivering babies. So like, if you, think of just nature in its purest form, someone does get pregnant the moment they could, their births tend to be a lot more difficult because their body is a lot smaller and you have this large, other human growing inside of them. And so it's this interesting sort of happenstance, or this scenario we find ourselves in, where we're like, yeah, technically, according to nature, you can get pregnant, and that's when nature has decided that you are allowed, I guess, so to speak, if nature was an omnipotent being, to become pregnant. But yet, it most likely, at least from a birth perspective, going to add more degree of difficulty and complications if you take out the whole societal norm, the whole 18-year-old, like everything over 18 is consensual. You take out all the sort of societal constructs we have around raising a family and being sexually active. It's almost like, the body, there's like, sure, it says it's ready, but it's not really ready. Kind of one of those we had talked about before, kind of like other ways, like examples of that, like the appendix. Like sometimes the appendix, people are just like, let's just cut that thing out. Like it has no purpose. But yet we still, to this day in 2022, right, we have these sort of bugs in our code of humans, to use a software engineering metaphor.
Or some vestigial things left over code where nobody knows. They look at it, nobody knows what the fuck's going on. You go, oh, okay, this looks interesting. I don't know what the fuck it's doing, but this looks interesting. But let me, I feel like I want to nail it down a little bit
Sure.
in terms of what your view is or your stance on it, just to see where we're at. You were kind of more talking about, or I got the sense kind of talking about a little bit more of kind of the extreme cases where we're saying, if you're under 18 or if you're a young child, is abortion right? In terms of if you're like 12 or 13 or 13 or 14, you're pregnant,
Yeah.
what do you do in those scenarios?
Yeah.
So I think for the purposes of this, I think we're probably both aligned very quickly. We can do this on extreme cases. So rape, incest, it's hard for me to find a stance or to find an argument that I find compelling when somebody talks about the rape case or the incest case, where I go, you know what, you're right. We should conserve, life at conception. That individual that should carry till birth, right? That baby. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like I can say definitively for myself, my personal stance is that doesn't make any sense for somebody for incest, rape, to be forced to carry to term. So
I think it's hard. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say I appreciate it, and I'm to that degree too, more on that side. I find it harder for me personally to, I guess, see the opposing side. But I think essentially the question is, there's this tug of war of like, where do we draw the line of like manslaughter versus like reproductive health, like proper reproductive health, right? I think it's so hard to draw a line because this process isn't a binary process, right? There's so many things going on. Okay, now the semen has penetrated the egg. Okay, now there's a heartbeat. Okay, now you can start to see like different like structures. Like where are you going to say like, okay, now that's a human being,
Well, let's focus this. What I was getting at, why I brought up those extreme cases, because let's not get in the weeds about those extreme cases. So let's not worry about those, because in terms of kind of our stance. So I'm assuming we're both kind of aligned there in terms of where you have some extreme situations that can happen where you and me both would say abortion makes sense regardless of kind of what your stance is. There are some times where it's absolutely necessary, and it seems very clear cut where it's pretty binary in terms of reasonable that an abortion should be allowed.
Yeah, but I guess to take all sort of perspectives, are there people arguing out there that 12-year-olds were raped, like should to bring the baby to term? Is that the pro?
Yeah, believe that or not. Yeah, some people are like the extremist side. And to be honest with you, I'm not too interested in the extreme case. Like maybe a little bit to actually hear people rationalize it, but let's just talk about the general case. Let's not talk about rape, incest, kind of those awful things that happen. We can kind of weave that back in if we want to, but
sure.
Just
so
maybe
what do you say the average case is, or the normal case?
Let's see, teenagers fucking, 17, 18, you're having a good time.
First trimester, right? It's like within, like they just figure out they had sex, missed their period, and they're like, uh-oh, I'm pregnant. Boom. Like, I don't want this thing.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the how at least I hear about it. I haven't been in a situation because I've done some stupid shit when I've been younger, for sure, in terms of where I gambled a little bit, rolled some dice.
Yep.
But for the most part, I was fairly conscientious about the decisions I was making, but not always. And it really is just kind of running probability. And fortunately for me, I was never forced to be or put in that situation where it actually needed to come into play. Right. Yep. So I understand there is something to be said when rubber meets the road, in terms of what would you actually do when you're faced with that versus the hypothetical. But yeah, for the standard case, I think we start talking about within maybe that first trimester is kind of what I'm thinking about, because we'll go to the other side of the extreme. I'm not interested in talking about, abortions at, beyond 3 trimesters or, 8 months late term abortion.
Yeah.
That sounds wrong. I can get there if there's, again, some extreme cases for the mother's health, but I can kind of say, all right, you probably shouldn't abort. That seems a little bit too late at that point, right? There's something that seems different than in, like, say, the first trimester. So there's kind of this interesting, there's limits. We've kind of got this lower bounds and upper bounds that we're kind of talking about a little bit. But
you say the other side, as if like this thing is a two-sided, right? You like, the other side of the situation. So you seem to have created some sort of like dichotomy of like, okay, not okay. And I think that's where the tug of war is, right? Of like, where is that line right in the middle where you just take one step, now it is no longer okay, right?
Yeah.
And that's the pro-life is like, the moment the individual is pregnant and they have a pregnancy test, it could be 2-3 days. I don't know. I'd have to check how long after conception a pregnancy test will yield a positive result reliably. But the moment that is reliably yes, then that's it, regardless of if there's any heartbeat, regardless of any sort of like, they're just like, yep, they're pregnant the moment that, and I think that probably goes off some sort of hormone. I'm not sure how the pregnancy test works.
I think so.
Off the top of my head,
sounds
but
right.
Like excess hormone secretion of some sort.
If I was just to quickly kind of distill or boil down my stance on, because I was actually thinking about this when I heard about Roe v. Wade being overturned, and I think the way that I've looked into it a little bit exactly what that means, and really they're just, from my understanding, is it's not federally protected. There aren't rights that are kind of granted saying that you're able to have an abortion as a woman. It's basically kicked back to the states themselves to come up with laws and to put that in place. So you're going to have cases where you have states that are going to have, maybe no real strict or very few pieces of legislation around when you can and can't get an abortion, and other states when you can get an abortion, it's probably going to be very limited if they allow it at all, right? So it sounds like there's going to be kind of a mixed bag.
But I guess practically this means that abortion, like depending on the person who is seeking to get an abortion, is still a viable option in the sense that they can travel accordingly. Essentially, if finances according, they have that flexibility, right? So now they get a bit of the sort of socioeconomic class in play here, and it tends to, favor those who have the ability to move themselves across the state. And I think we've seen similar things like that happen before with in Europe. It was a very similar thing where some countries had, I think it was Sweden, just finished reading a book about a global health professor in Sweden where up until 60s abortion was illegal. So a lot of people went to Poland to get abortions. I think that might be a similar sort of effect here, is for those who can afford it. Well, they will, travel, take a plane trip to, imagine, blue states such as New York, California will keep abortion legal and then be able to, abort their babies, or have an abortion rather. Yeah, that's kind of how I see this unfold.
We'll see if maybe they'll make it a feature, an add-on to the Tesla. Sorry.
Come to our rescue, Elon.
Elon, hey, I got a great idea for you.
Oh my god, just autopilot, auto abortion. Oh my god.
Auto abortion? What is that, an alien where they detect that there's a life form, and so you get in your Tesla and it detects that there's a life form and starts blaring like alarm. Then it straps you down. Anyways, I think that I can boil my view down though, because I don't know if it's the right word, but it's utilitarian in terms of, I'll use the word utilitarian because I look at it as, if we were in a situation where humanity was in a dire need for, like, we needed more humans, we needed more of our species, then it would make sense to me that we would enforce or instrict or put policies in place to protect life as much as we can to increase our numbers. We're kind of in, the way I look at it now, we're in an inverse where we don't need more people. There isn't a need. We have plenty of people here, and we actually have a hard time caring for, in terms of healthcare, in terms of proper education. And this is just looking at the country itself and not necessarily even talking about how that applies globally. So the utility of, is this child warranted? Is this actually, if you can't care for the child or you don't have the means to provide for it, generally my view on it is I'm pro-choice. And I think that we'll start talking about that a little bit, but you'll find out that I'm pretty flexible in terms of my view, in terms of, I think you should be able to have that abortion fairly later on, as far as you can have it earlier or fairly later on, but you've got a pretty wide window to be able to have that abortion. But just from a utilitarian perspective, I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, is what is the downside in terms of, do we need more people here? Are we okay with having abortion? Can we focus those resources somewhere else?
Now, I'm curious if we could bring something that came up as we were kind of discussing this. Like, if we could bring, obviously science is a great north star in general. I wouldn't say always. I think in general, defaulting to a scientific outlook is not the worst case scenario. Generally, a pretty rational one. Something that came to mind: what if there was some? If we brought statistics in, I don't have any statistics off the top of my head here, but in terms of like if the baby were born at a various, because for example, like premature babies, right? Happens all the time, where a mother gives birth before the due date, requires a lot of medical attention in order to keep the baby alive. However, most times for regular births, once the baby is born, of course, once the amniotic fluid is purged from the lungs and the baby starts breathing, which is, from my understanding, mostly a natural process and happens on its own. The baby is self-sufficient, no longer requires machinery in order to survive. Of course, aside from food within whatever 24, 48, maybe even 72 hours. I think we have any experiments out there how long a newborn baby can survive without food.
That's the babies are. So what's happening today is that they're being born. They're growing up much faster, and they're going right into a keto diet.
Yeah.
So low carbs. They're actually trying to fast right out of the womb. So
absolutely.
It's lots of change there.
Yeah. But that's an interesting perspective to see, like, how soon can a baby be born without requiring machinery to be born, right? Without being able to survive on its own, I would say right off the bat, where it would die within 24 hours now. Would that be a line, like a fair line to draw? Like, hey, this baby is no longer becomes like an independent. I mean, to a degree, babies are, of course, dependent on their mothers, right? And any sort of, father figure as well, but more like biologically for food, nurture. I mean, they need to be fed. They need they need to be breastfed. Or highly recommend breastfeeding too for anyone listening, as opposed to formula for as long as possible. That's
from a personal experience.
Yes, personal experience. So it's a plug for my mom. It's a plug for my mom. Just there you go. Breastfeed as much as possible.
It's getting weird.
Till age 7.
No. those titties, yeah. Okay,
yeah. But yeah, would that count? I mean, I know, I don't know. There's a lot involved here, and I think most pro-lifers are all, the moment pregnancy exists, like, can't touch it. That is now a governmentally protected form of life. Is that
like at the time of conception? Like
conception,
in terms of,
yeah. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a hard time. I have a hard time getting there at the time of conception, but
which is really interesting too, because like, what about a miscarriage? People don't get that, like, abortion is illegal, but like, what if miscarriage, like accidental, like, just so if you take the law into play, right? Manslaughter, from my understanding, I don't have a law degree, but that's an intentional, or homicide is intentional killing. Manslaughter is killing intentional or non-intentional, perhaps non-intentional. But then you take a miscarriage now with that same rationale, unintentional, but the baby dies. I haven't heard, at least, of any situations where women have gone to jail from a miscarriage, even though the net result, whether or not it was intentional or unintentional, the baby died, right?
Yeah.
And like, so could that logic be applied in the same sort of vein to say, like, hey, like, sure, it's not an intentional killing, but the baby died. So, mother, you need to go to jail because your body resulted in this baby being dead, even though you didn't decide to.
Do you even think that question is a good question? Like, if I just phrase it kind of broadly, which is like we were talking about, abortion allowed or not, so to speak. Is that the right question to ask? Or is the question to ask is, what do we want to, when is life? When do we want to actually say that this is life itself?
That is the question.
Yeah. So it's kind of like let's cut to it, because one answer is probably the other, or at least you get closer to it. If you say that this point is what we're calling life, then the rest of it probably starts to come into play. Right. And I truly think, just like if I ask you, hey, Dane, show me your common ancestor with a monkey. When did you have a common ancestor with a monkey? Show me who that was. Show me exactly who that was. When was your ancestors not a Homo sapien? When did that transition happen? when you ask a question, like, it's not a good question. I mean, fair enough for everybody to be curious. You should ask those questions, but there isn't one defining point. There isn't some clear binary switch that gets flipped on where you say, oh, now you have life. Yep. And as a society, and this is where I separate my personal view, my personal stance on it from whatever society wants to do. Because I understand this is different for me than, say, like murder, where I say murder to me is wrong. And as a society, we say murder is wrong, right? So I'm good there. But on abortion, I can go, my personal stance is pro-choice. You should do what is in the best interest of yourself and ultimately for that child, if you can take care of it, if you can't, whatever's in the best interest there, as vague as that may be. But society, I'm fine with letting that dictate what we as a society say. I'm good with that.
Which is birth, right? Everyone's on the same page that after birth, there's no discrepancies, that once a baby is born, if it is then killed, then you are liable by the eyes of the law to go to trial, right? I would guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if you heard. I mean, I could definitely see a scenario where somebody's being neglectful or doing something that's extremely harmful to a child, while they're still in the womb at 8 months and somehow being tried with something. That wouldn't necessarily be surprising to me if whether we go back and we go look at court cases or if there's something like that that's been raised. But where do you define life? What does that actually mean? Where do you find, actually, I should phrase it differently. Where do we say that this life has these rights, these inalienable rights that we have to kind of preserve and protect? Like, where do we define that point? And man, that's a challenge. I don't know. Where have you, if you actually take a stab at it, have you thought about that? The most common ones I hear about is at the time of conception. And then I joke to myself, which is, if I guess as long as it's at the time of conception, but you think, what if you go a little bit further? Like if I go jerk off, have I done genocide? Right? You've heard that before. And what if I go a little bit forward at a heartbeat? Like you hear about heartbeat laws, right? As soon as there's a heartbeat, you can't abort. So do you have one, like in terms of something that you've that seems like the most logical to you, where you say that at the time of conception, heartbeat, at the time of being, the actual, I've heard even that the time that the child's actually born in terms of once it leaves, the vaginal canal or takes the first breath, right? I've heard all these kind of different stances there. I'm sort of looking at it, I think a bit rather in a statistical lens. I want to see where everyone is on the same page. So let's start walking it back from there. 1-year-old, you kill a 1-year-old, that person should go to trial, most likely be convicted of felony or whatever the appropriate legal ramifications are for that. Right? I would say a unilateral consensus that 1-year-olds. You see where I'm going with this?
I see where you're going with. I feel like we're doing a trolley problem. Have you heard of the trolley problem before?
No.
Okay. Briefly, and I'll just give a real quick, brief overview of the trolley problem, because it's actually a really good. It is a good thought. It's a hypothetical thought experiment where you're trying to see where your differences are, where you kind of see that morals and ethics are subjective. And so the idea with this trolley problem is, Dane, I'm going to snap my fingers, and you are going to wake up on a train. You're in the very front of the train. You can see out the window. And sure enough, it's going to basically, the tracks are going to split, right? You know that there's a lever. I don't know how you have this information, but there's a lever where you can change to go from the track that you're on that's going left to go right. Okay.
There's a certain amount of people tied to each train track.
Exactly. And so we start out with something simple, right? And I say the track is going towards somebody right now. If you don't do anything, the track is going towards a murderer, somebody that, and don't worry about how you have this information. It's just a thought experiment. So you know that this individual is a murderer. And then to the right of that, you see somebody that you know nothing about, right? You don't have any information about them. And so what do you do, right? And you start playing with different permutations of this, different combinations of this. Sorry, I think it's combinations of this. And what you'll find out is there's a point where you and me will disagree. Right? Most likely, where we'll start to put in some arbitrary factors, or you start to apply some variable where I'd say, well, no, Dane, I don't think those are equivalent. And he'd say, yeah, no, these it doesn't make any difference. Or maybe it's the fact that I'm even taking an action at all, right? The fact that I didn't touch the lever to change anything, that's predetermined. That's fate. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't tell it to switch directions. So whatever happens, happens. Right.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, continue. I feel like you're going down the trolley problem because now we're going to start at 2 years and we're all going to agree a year, 2 years. And then we're going to get to this point where we go, you'll start to, what you'll see is people start to peel off.
Yep.
10% here, 20% here.
And I'm just trying to see where that point is. I mean, that requires information that I don't have right now in terms of, right, we've all agreed laws, once the baby is born, 6 months, I'd say we're all on the same page. 1 month, I think once the baby is born, if they're killed, that's still, illegal. And then now you start getting into the gray territory of before this is born. I'm curious to see where, not to say that one should follow necessarily the popular opinion on a matter, but I'd be curious to see like where that falls off in terms of just globally where the opinion lay, because although it's not the best way, it is I think a good sort of measure as to what ideas are more vogue, I guess, to use that word or adjective, as opposed to some that are more taboo. For example, like homosexuality. It's been taboo for almost the entirety of history, and it's been illegal and punishable by death, and still some countries to today. But that's changed. That's changed now, and you see where's that changed, and you see like, is there a similar trend with this sort of set of ideas that maybe there is a moving tide of opinion that like, yep, this is okay, guys. Like we can all be on the same page there. So I'm curious for that, if there's a sort of shift of sentiment or opinion, or if this is something that, may just be this constant tug of war indefinitely.
And I think the part of the way that I feel, or what I was hinting at earlier, is I think what is most important is for us as a society to come to some sort of an agreement, right?
Yeah.
And just like we've defined certain things to be all right, if we want to define it at the state level, I'm even good with that, right? If that's really what we ultimately want to decide, that's as a society, that's what we want to do, even though that's confusing to me. I don't necessarily reconcile that and go, oh, I would do, that's how I would do things. But I see this as it'll constantly evolve. Right. And I think in terms of, there's some cases where if we're in detriment in terms of the species as a whole, we probably should reconsider. We should reevaluate some of these things about how we start to treat and try to preserve life, or what are the measures we're willing to take to preserve that life. But that's kind of what I see as a natural outcome of this, is because we didn't in our country, in the United States, we didn't put anything. It wasn't federal law. Right. We had, the Supreme Court kind of, everybody was kind of behind that ruling and using that. But, shame on us for not actually just getting it to the point where we're saying that this is a right, get it ratified, get it in the whatever it takes to do that. Because now we're left in this place where it really will ebb and flow. And I don't see this as being anything that by any means is going to be, come to any kind of conclusion in the next couple of years. It's this really high, intense, fiery situation that I can understand both sides really well. One piece that I'll add in there, I guess, that I was just thinking about is when somebody brings in kind of the religious factor in terms of their religion, and that's where they're coming from. And I think that's a lot of it in terms of where people want to protect and preserve life at the time of conception as they look at it from a religious point of view. And I have a really hard time grounding myself or grounding any views from a point of religion.
That doesn't make sense. Thomas, you're atheist.
That's yeah.
That's a hot take for an atheist, Thomas.
Well, no, I'm saying it doesn't make any sense to So to each their own. I think that the best thing that we could do is kind of just we should pass something into law. I mean, it would be great if it's at the federal level, is really what I would prefer, and we say that that's what it is.
Yeah. So I guess I don't really. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I don't really know the surroundings of why this was overturned, because at some point this was Roe v. Wade had been in place for a while, and I don't understand or rather I would understand, but I don't understand at the moment so date decided 1973. So wow, this is
1973.
A while. That's what, almost 60 years. Math wrong? 50 years?
50 years.
Yeah.
50 years,
Wow.
yeah.
Interesting. That's pretty big. I wonder.
It was
There's a lot.
actually Natalie's parents were over, and so they're baby boomer, or let's see, yeah, baby boomers around that time frame. But Natalie's dad was talking about specifically, he remembers being a teenager when that passed in terms
Wow.
of Roe v. Wade and how big of a deal that was at the time. And then he was, for him to see that kind of a change over his lifetime was something as kind of as big as, abortion rights. I mean, he was mentioning what a big deal that was. And can you imagine what we have yet to see in our lifetime in terms of just there will be changes in terms of morals, ethics, things that we say are acceptable now that, maybe we take for granted that will, evolve and change over time. But something as what we think is kind of concrete or protected as, fundamental as abortion rights can be changed.
Absolutely. And we're going to take a quick pause. We'll be right back. Alrighty, folks.
About this big, fully erect, fully erect.
That's huge.
This big.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gargantuan.
Yeah. It requires some fluffing. Generally a good, I've got a pretty strict routine about when I get sleep, wake up, fully erect, fully hard.
That means everything's working.
It means everything to me.
Great. To transition quite back, as I was plugging in my headphones here, we had originally, I guess a little more context for listeners here. We were originally interested in steering away from politics when Thomas and I were discussing what we wanted or going over rather what we want to discuss for the podcast. And I had that sort of that thought we're talking about politics. And I just told Thomas before we went back live again was I have no problem with political discourse as long as we don't start attacking each other's character, right? Because these ideas come and go. And I think the most eloquent way that you can think of ideas is like clothes, like they're fashion. You can take them on and put them off, right? Some ideas are, as I talked about, more in vogue, more for the current times, and some are no longer, right? Like that Jews should go to concentration camps and die. Like that was a popular idea in Germany in the late 1930s and early 1940s, right? And you express that idea and people wouldn't disagree with you, right? And now we look at that and like that idea just no longer has any ground or any footing in what we value and cherish as humans today. And that could change. Hopefully it doesn't. I think we're going in the right direction. We're definitely going in the right direction here with that one specifically. But as long as we can appreciate and respect one another. And Thomas, you were going to talk about like the importance it is to have be able to have this sort of discourse.
Yeah. And I think that I'll share an example that was kind of around this that I was actually kind of taken aback by, and that actually it bothered me deeply because it made me feel like I had no right to actually express myself the way that I was thinking or the way that I was kind of analyzing, about abortion rights or kind of what it meant to me. And I understand that my perspective is different, not being, I'm never going to be pregnant. So I understand there's some differences in opinion here. But when I was talking to my partner about it, and this is a topic we generally don't talk too much about since it ends up getting fairly heated between me. Yeah, that's right. We end up full on intercourse. That's exactly right. It ends up being it ends up getting pretty heated. And one of the, I lost my train of thought there. I'm not sure where I was going. I was thinking about intercourse, and now I'm off on that. I distracted myself.
Once we talk about dead babies, hot damn! I just cannot control the waves.
You remember that fully erect bit that I was talking about there? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I've got it. I've got my train of thought back. But being when we were talking about this, and I think that it was the first time where there came out with that opinion piece from the Supreme Court that it sounded like they were going to be overturning or revisiting Roe v. Wade when that came out. And I was expressing kind of the way I thought about it, much in terms of what we're kind of talking about right now. And what came out of my partner's mouth was basically along the lines of, you have no right to have an opinion. You're not a woman. This isn't something that affects you. And that was actually deeply upsetting to me in terms of there are many situations that I'll never get to, fully have the same experience as somebody else, but that doesn't discredit, that doesn't disvalue the way maybe I've thought about it. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the time to listen to the way that I'm thinking about it, to understand it, to help educate me, or to say, you know what, that's a fair way to look at it. There's people like, go ahead.
Yeah, basically the underlying current there to me was like, your opinion doesn't matter, and that's
just to shut down conversation. There's probably the scariest thing that you can do, or the most dangerous thing that you can do. That's where you get people you get a lot of extremism that comes out. If you can't have discourse, debate, conversation, exploring ideas, if you're afraid of talking about these things because all that ends up happening is maybe emotional, things get overly emotional, people fight. That's the wrong opinion to have, which is I shouldn't share my opinion, right? That's the whole point, is being able to express how you feel, to educate yourself.
We're all humans, right? I think humans all should take heed to a certain degree of other humans' perspective and experience, right? We don't have separate laws for men and women. If you kill a woman or you kill a man, it's the same sentence. Obviously, age has to do with it, and like the way and abouts it was executed, comes into play there. But if you take identical, you remove all those other variables, like you're going to get the same sentence. And so that line of thinking, that's where if I were to go down that further, it's like, oh, we now need separate laws for all these various different, people and sects of humanity, which I don't see personally being productive or constructive.
So in short, speak up, speak the way you think about things, listen, educate yourself, have make sure that you're listening and that you're sharing your opinion the way that you think about it, and try to get to, try to rationalize and make things logical as much as you can. That's really my stance and view on things.
Yeah. And I think underlying, like, be respectful, like understand and respect the fact that someone can have a different opinion from you, even though you may disagree with them. Like, you still should always have respect for someone, unless I guess to a degree that they're coming from a point of I guess perhaps there's a line that can be drawn there in terms of they seek ill, for lack of a better phrase, or generally intend to do harm.
There's always those cases like that, right? It's just not for the vast majority. Those aren't my experiences, and you just gotta make sure that you kind of embrace those. So I'm big in terms of, as long as you're being respectful, sharing the way that you think about things, trying to understand why others think about things. That's generally my what we say, northstar, guiding light besides science. But
yeah, absolutely. Hard pivot. I don't know if you finished listening to the Michio Kaku podcast of Joe Rogan.
No, I did not. What do you? Wait, we're going from. God damn it!
Hard pivot. I told you.
Hard pivot. Fucking right off that flat Earth. We're fucking gone to the moon.
We're going.
So we're talking about the. We were talking about abortion. Now we're going to aliens. Is that right?
Not per se. Just more so.
Okay.
I recently had the question. I brought it up to you. That, like, is intelligence such a hard pivot? I was thinking about this. I'm like, all right, what are we going to talk about today? I'm like, I kind of don't want to like talk about abortion, and we did that. I'm like, all right, I feel like that's run its course for the most part. We've expressed our personal views. We've provided some perspective, and
do my product placement for Hot Pockets.
There you go.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, I don't.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Yeah.
I don't have too much more to go on it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that's kind of where I drew the line personally, or I rather said, let's switch gears here. But I had the question that what if a while ago, like, is intelligence inevitable on a planet? And Michio said no, and I think that is actually the prevailing scientific idea, is that intelligence is not required for life to prevail. It is more so just evolution, because a lot of evolution is random, right? There's just this random mutation that occurred, that there's one cheetah that was, or I guess not cheetah on our planet, but maybe some other planet way out there, there's a bunch of smart cheetahs, some ape was slightly smarter and was able to pick up a stick and had the opposable thumbs, and hundreds of thousands of years later, here we are, because dinosaurs were around for 230 million years. I was like, wait, would we all be smart dinos? Like, what if the asteroid never hit? Humans, there's a good chance that humans would never be around. It'd just be the same fucking dinos eating and killing each other. Maybe smart. Would we be smart? I don't know. I don't think necessarily. That was the question that I kind of had and was kind of interested in exploring a little bit. Like, what?
So what's your view on it in terms of, do you think that prior to Michio Kaku, and I never say his name right, my boy Michio.
Michio.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. What's kind of your thought on it? Is it something that you just do you have an opinion on it, where you think that there's kind of a convergence where you get in a reasonable amount of time, like, we're not just saying infinitely long, but in a reasonable amount of time you'll actually get something like human intelligence? It'll just kind of crop up.
I don't think so. And maybe we'll bring my little brother on next episode to provide more color to this, but he got a degree at Davis in this, specifically. I forget the exact title, but I butcher it saying like evolutionary ecology, but it's essentially evolution as a major at UC Davis. And he said, no, like, intelligence is not necessary for life to persist. And you see that on the time scale of dinosaurs. 230 million years dinosaurs were around. Humans, what? I mean, there's a bit of disagreement, but 10,000, 20,000, maybe even say 100,000 years to like go far out the extreme. Like, that's what, 1/2000th, 1/20,000th of the time. And here we are, like, stewards of the earth, being able to manipulate our environment and leave the earth, right, and go to celestial bodies close by.
We should be clear too, when you say intelligence, what do you mean by intelligence? I was kind of, you saw the way I started to approach it, with like intelligence, like human intelligence, but what do you mean in terms of, because you have other animals like octopus, they can fucking open jars.
Yeah,
they actually understand how to open a jar to grab what they need and move on. Ravens, I think they can actually do quite a bit of I think their intelligence.
Yeah, ravens are cool. Yeah, their ability to
dogs
speak.
have, I mean, to say dogs are not intelligent, that doesn't jive with me. There's a degree, it's the same thing as binary. Yeah. So when you say intelligence, what do you mean like to the degree where you're able to actually kind of, I don't want to see anything that I say, I think of animals being able to
ever
do too,
since 1906, when
there it
Orville Wright, before we flew, we were all fucking monkeys. Once we could fly,
right.
That's when we were intelligent.
There it is. Fucking monkeys on rockets now. Yeah, fucking blasting off.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question too. I guess the understanding of, I mean, Homo sapien, is that intelligence? The ability to, the final evolution of, our final evolution. Like, we are no longer evolving. We have no.
No, careful now. No, careful.
We're not. I mean, we're not. There's no evolutionary pressure to evolve. You think about it. If anything, it's the opposite, because people who generally would die were keeping alive, and now their genes are proliferating across society.
You cannot turn off the perpetual motion machine. Now, I should be careful. You cannot turn off that. Once you start that motor, as long as there's life, it's always going to evolve. Granted, the kind of what you're talking about too, where we've really taken control. We've taken the controller, the joystick. We've got the joystick, so to speak, but we're still going to evolve because we don't control our planet, right? And what I mean by that is that you're going to have things like global warming, right, where you're going to have a natural heating. You'll go through cycles. There's going to be things where natural selection comes into play. There will be pressures. So.
Michio said no, so I'm going to side with my boy.
Your boy. It's your boy. No, but there's always going to be... I mean, I don't know what degree you're talking about in terms of evolution, but we're always evolving. Things are going to happen in our gene pool. Diseases are going to...
Yeah, but we're not dying as... I mean, I guess if you think like COVID, to a degree...
But that's an example.
Sure. It's extremely slow. Yeah, fair.
Milk, you've got people, I forget where it's at, what tribe it is, but I think
they drink so much milk, they fucking kill themselves from shitting.
6 tits, 3 on either side.
Fuck yeah.
And I've heard about one in the center. Yeah.
Let's go.
But you actually have, and there's another tribe where they actually have been, they're able to actually I forget what it is specifically, but they're able to get more oxygen at higher altitudes or deal with less oxygen at higher altitudes. But there's some genetic differences. There's also ones around some genetic differences around some of the I think it was tribes that are able to actually hold their breath for significantly longer in terms of their lung capacity. So evolution happens. It's still going to happen. Granted, I do agree that it seems like because we have the reins, because we have the controller, that maybe to the degree that we see evolution previously, that it's not kind of the same.
Yeah, he used the word evolutionary pressure. Doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, to some degree it does.
But we don't have to, I mean, I guess let's look at the most recent mass death experience. COVID, I mean, we would call COVID being the most recent global sort of event that resulted in the largest number of deaths. I mean, I guess it all depends, but let's just say like, people who are genetically, you can't just say like everyone who had weaker immune systems died. I mean, that was true to a degree. People who were generally less healthy died, but that I wouldn't say that's purely based off of genetics. I think that's a lot of that was lifestyle decisions in terms of deciding to either be overweight or overeating, or I mean, maybe to agree there's genetic involved with that, but
I mean, isn't that kind of societal pressure? Like, let me give an example, which is like myself. So I've gone through quite a journey in terms of weight loss, but you could imagine that people like myself that are able to put on weight fairly easily, right? That especially in a society where, like the United States, where there's no limit in terms of cheap, fast, greasy, fucking amazing food, right? And I would probably die younger. Right. And chances are, because that's going to ultimately, lead to maybe higher cancer. Maybe I get to have offspring, maybe not. But there's always pressure there's always going to be natural selection pressures, right? Whether or not we're saying that it's going in whichever particular direction. But I still think there's evolutionary pressure there.
I would say it's marginal, though. So to a lot of degree,
I don't disagree.
Yeah, it's almost to the point where it's not worth taking into account into the equation.
As long as you're just not turning off the mechanism. You spoke in an absolute, and that's where I was like,
fair.
Can't turn. Fair. It's kind of one of those things. No matter where you go, it's like one of those fundamental truths for me. Like, if we do find life, going back to your original one about intelligence, if we do find life out there in the universe, in the cosmos,
that's all agreed upon is real and exists and intelligent, as opposed to all these other anecdotes that come up.
Right. If we do find life out there, it's going to play by the same rules that we know. It's going to play by evolution. It's going to play by natural selection. Those mechanisms of life that we've uncovered and we found, I think those are, so to speak, fundamental truths about life. That can always be, proven and changed, but I really don't think it will be. I think that's the means how life is able to adapt, to evolve, to go on. I don't think we're going to somehow find life and go, no, but evolution has nothing to do here.
So it sounds like our boy Michio didn't persuade you with his beliefs.
Oh, this is where, yeah. So that doubt, that voice in the back of your mind, don't go against Michio, not your boy.
He's our boy.
Well, so a science communicator. So there's a difference here, though. A science communicator isn't interested in talk. It generally doesn't want to. He doesn't excite people about talking about ambiguity, about nuance. He excites people you get excited because you feel like you've learned something that you can take away with you. And maybe it's not the whole truth, but it's enough to where you feel like you've got something that's piqued your interest. And I'm used to this too. Like when you watch, I really love the show with Neil deGrasse Tyson, Cosmos. And you'll find out the things that he talks about or the things that he says or what they go over in their episode, that there's a fair amount that's there, but there's always there's more to be uncovered. There's more to unpack. So I understand as a science communicator that you generally, what you're saying or what you're getting out there, you kind of have to weigh, you have to weigh how much nuance or how much, you're going to inject into it.
Fair. So you're saying that he is going to take the side of the more provocative stories as opposed to the more mundane.
we need more people excited about science. We need more kids excited about science, right? We all want that badly. You want more people going into STEM fields. You want more people spending time pondering about, wouldn't it be great to get out of the solar system? How would we do that?
You said, I'm thinking about something actually. You said before, to jump back into briefly abortion. You said we don't need more people. I think that was a pretty loaded statement.
No, I don't need more people.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? I think the way that when I say that, I said it kind of flippantly. We don't need more people in the sense that I think before, if we go back 500 years or go back 1,000 years, or we go back to where Homo sapiens were still in Africa, right? Where there was actually, it wouldn't take much to actually make us go extinct as a species or just kind of wipe us off the earth. So procreation, really important. Make sure that we have plenty of variety, make sure that it would keep able to spread. So every life counted, so to speak. And then when you kind of play that, when you fast forward that now, I think where I start to draw a delineation or something that I've noted or that I see is that the life that we have that is born, that's here right now, the human life that we have, we're not investing in that. Or it doesn't seem like we are in terms of the educational systems. Like that's where, instead of spending resources on new life being brought into this world, why not take the resources that we have right now and continue to bolster and ask the question is, what's best for our species?
You heard it here first, guys. Thomas said, stop fucking right now.
Stop fucking. Hey, Jeff, stop fucking. Put it back. Jeff.
Take it out.
No. God damn it, Jeff. Go outside. Cool
Thomas
down.
Thomas is going to single-handedly stop everyone in the world from fucking. We got to focus, guys. We got to focus. Stop it. All right. Got to go. Peace. Stop. You stop. Peace. Got to go.
There's a lot there's a lot of different views you could take on that and probably pick apart what I said. Fair enough. But at least is a fair question to say is this the best use of our finite resources? Should we be is there a way to continue, educating women, men, children, providing across the globe, in terms of raising that quality of life? Or should we be bringing in new life? And obviously it's probably a mixture of the two, but it's a fair question to ask, especially when we're saying that, no, we need to preserve every single life at the very moment of conception, right? Is that the best thing to be doing? We've
hit the point of critical mass, I think, quite a while ago, to the point where we, our species or the effect, or rather the importance of, this is such a hard, I guess, stance to take, but just from a pure reproductive perspective, natural resources perspective, we have passed the point in which our future of humanity is in limbo due purely based off of population. We have enough natural resources to provide. All of us, we have the infrastructure. Now you're saying let's make the lives for those who are alive already better, as opposed to trying to cement humanity's footprint on this planet better, because we're not going anywhere anytime soon.
I don't know. What are your thoughts? Does it kind of take you a step back? Do you disagree with that?
Well, it's hard to say, because so I had a roommate in college who was pro-life, and so naturally I questioned him a bit on it, as his viewpoint was different from mine. And it's an interesting idea, although I don't agree with it, that, what about all the other, Einsteins or all these other prolific people who had drastic, impacts on humanity, were now no longer around, right? So what if what are we at, almost 8 billion? What if we're as a humanity, let's say hypothetically, all decide, all right, we're going to stop having babies. We're going to now focus on making the world better, getting rid of global warming issue, crisis, stop disease. What if the 8 billionth and one, the 8 billion first person was some sort of global leader of the changed humanity forever, that will be in history books forever. Marcus Aurelius, JFK, all these Mahatma Gandhi. Like, what if it was one of them, and that accelerated the growth of humanity, unlike other people? I mean, it's hard to say, and that to a degree makes it seem like some people are more important than others, or I guess some people's. Yeah,
I'm okay with that. You can absolutely say that in terms of I think you can. It's fair to be able to say that the contributions of some has been far greater than the contributions of other in terms of like our species. Like, I'm okay with that. I accept that.
It's an interesting perspective to take, though, because that's to say we know the effects of every individual person's contributions.
And it's personal too, right? It's where you put value. So I can't say it in an absolute sense, but I would say it's hard for me to say that my value is as much as somebody like Newton, is as much as somebody like Einstein. I don't put for myself, I don't put myself in that same realm. I want to play my part in society. I want to, do what I'm supposed to do. I want to be able to find the pleasures in this life. I want to stop Jeff from fucking. But at the same time, I recognize that to your point, that there are some truly gifted individuals that have done amazing things that have helped, lift humanity up further than it would have been maybe in another 100 years, right? That's how much they've accelerated. So I do see that,
and I think that's a very common perspective. But that goes, I would say, in like a I don't know, a very typical vein, in the sense that one person's outstanding efforts, which I agree, there are individuals who do put out outstanding effort, contrary to others, deserve the rewards that they achieved because of those outstanding efforts. But that's not to say that there are others who perhaps didn't have or didn't push forward as vigorously, that didn't play an extremely important role in those specific person's accomplishments and roles to their right. It could be
a collective element. Yeah, I agree.
It could be as simple as, like, because I feel like there's a lot of achievement that happens outside of individual control. Like, effort is extremely important, and the most tangible and controllable thing that we can do in order to increase the chance of success. But I would say, like, success isn't guaranteed in every situation. I don't think, like, I wouldn't necessarily argue that effort and maybe this is an idea that some would disagree with, but like raw, unconstrained effort in any direction will inevitably be successful. Would you? I'm curious what your take on that is.
Make that more concrete for me. Raw, constrained effort.
Unconstrained effort. Would you say success is something that is controllable finitely? I feel like to a degree, that a lot of success is, you can influence your chances of success. But I would say success in general, or rather, like, high degrees of success, or, for example, like a great example of this, like Darwin, huge evolutionary, like, he was the father of evolution, huge figure. The boat, he originally wasn't going to go on the trip to, was it Costa Rica and the other islands in the Gulf? I forget where they went to, on those trips, but he wasn't on the original charter to go there, and someone got sick. I think it was sick. Anyway, there was a spot that was not his that got removed, and then he got put on that boat, and now boom, he started exploring all of these other aspects, and that's when the idea came to him. That was not in his control whatsoever. That was just something that happened, that he found himself in this situation completely unbeknownst to him. Regardless of any amount of effort that he did, this situation just arose, and he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Sure, he had this curiosity, sure he had this, but that by no means was his sort of like doing, right? We're like, I'm going to go on this because I have this theory of evolution that I've been planning my entire life. He's like, no, like, it just sort of came upon him, all the right sort of like series of events can be. I think that's like a fantastic example of it, that here's this hugely important person, Darwin, but I would say the person who didn't go on that trip is almost just as important because, and no one knows who the name, I mean, maybe we can look it up. But the name of that person is not, on everyone's top of mind because they don't know, most people don't know that or understand that. They think, oh, Darwin, he was the one who came up with that. But in fact, had it not been for Jeff, right?
No,
like he was important too. It's just we don't all recognize that he was extremely important in the formation of Charles Darwin. And I would say there's a non-zero chance. Is it 99 1%? Maybe, hard to put a number on it, but I would say there's a non-zero chance that had Darwin not gone on that trip, he would have never come up with the theory of evolution.
I think there's I look at it as kind of, so there's many different variables, and then the depending on when you were born, that time, those are kind of the society that you're born into. They're different filters, they're different gates that basically influence the type of people that go through those, that pass through those filters. And there's certain characteristics and qualities that I think, especially in science, in physics, that I think makes people successful, that you see. I mean, in extreme cases, you don't see somebody that's doing nothing, like laziness or just, just chilling out. Those aren't pushing the boundary. I don't think that's really ever pushed the boundary, so to speak, throughout history. Maybe, I don't know, but not often. But there's, there is a time and a place for the certain kind of individual and the genius that they bring. And I think you're absolutely spot on with what you're calling out, is that there is kind of this, it seems, how else could it happen? It had to be just this way, and it had to be this individual. But I think that's the kind of the magic of it, in terms of that, or it seems like magic, is it just seems to happen just that way, just for that individual. But yeah, I think that the time where you're born, things like that, it all kind of starts to apply different levels of filters, and the people that basically meet to that challenge, meet to that standard, those are the ones that get through.
And yeah, I think there's a subtle distinction that I'd personally like to make, if you weren't kind of aware of this already, is that by no means should we ever resign to our fate and start playing the victim mentality, right? That doesn't get us anywhere at all. Like, oh, woe is me, I live in a oppressive society, I can't do anything. Like, that's not going to get anyone anywhere, and generally not very productive, and I would say even to a degree counterproductive, especially to your own mental health. So, I think just recognizing that and being aware that, hey, these are my circumstances, and, ultimately, to use Eckhart Tolle's paradigm, like surrender to that, like, this is where I am, this is where I was born, this is where, you look at statistically, us in the United States, like, man, we won a pretty fucking awesome, like, birth lottery, if I do say so myself. Like, the amount of things we get on a day-to-day basis, that I think we're in like 1 in 7 when it comes to like our income levels. Like, we're in the top just here in America, not let alone us individually, like our ability to, just live our lives in an extremely comfortable manner, should we choose, without having to worry about drinking water and electricity, is amazing. Right. And we were just, that was completely it had no sort of degree of our personal like efforts and investment of efforts. So just be aware of that. Like, hey, it may not be in a situation that is as favorable, but that's ultimately, like, there's nothing you can do to change that.
Well, and that's I kind of to add to it, is maybe it's because you're and that's the variety of it. Is maybe it's because you're in an unfavorable situation that you're able to do something amazing, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to. And so it's like one of those where I see people, that have kids. I don't have any kids that have kids, and it seems like no matter what, maybe you'll find out that they had a horrible upbringing, that they had abusive parents, whatever it is, and somehow they turn out amazing, and you go, is any part of that success, was that always there, or was it just was part of that the circumstance in which they were brought? If they were brought into a family that was extreme, like the opposite, the polar opposite, would they have had the same same life? Would they have the same success? I don't know. I don't think so.
I would say I would agree. I don't think so. Two people
Yeah.
come to mind with that. David Goggins, definitely someone I
Who's
deeply
David
respect.
Goggins?
David Goggins is an individual who, let's see, had a really terrible upbringing. His dad would beat him. I think till like blood times, was extremely abusive to both him and his mom. Ended up going to Navy, through the Navy SEALs, and ended up just like on a whim. I don't know if it was like a single moment, but decided to run like an ultra marathon with like no training. I think it was like 80 miles or something, and did it until he essentially was like bleeding from his feet. And then when he finished, like defecated himself on the spot. He just lost. Like actually.
It was really getting built up there. You just slapped that one in there. Okay.
But just on the drop of a dime, he's a really big public speaker, really big motivator. He's done a lot of ultra marathons, 120 miles, extremely well, I guess, like conditioned, like mentally and physically. He had an extremely abusive relationship with or he was abused growing up. And so you think like, did this abuse somehow trigger this sort of, desire to break free of your circumstances that wouldn't have arisen in any other case? And another individual, an astronaut whose name I'm blanking on, who went into the SEALs, became a doctor, and then ultimately became an astronaut, also had a really terrible upbringing with his father. His dad, was abusive and, almost killed him and his mom, and was ultimately killed in a shootout with police officers in his house. And it's like, here he is, an astronaut, something extremely few amount of people can claim they've ever been. And so it's like, yeah, it makes you think like there is this silver lining to all these, these challenges that people have had growing up. Like, although it's not pleasurable, like, I don't know if everyone has that experience, or it's as quite as black and white as like, if you get, have a tough upbringing, you have, if you can't overcome it, and I think that's a big, sort of part of it. If you can overcome that, then you are off to an even better start than those who didn't have that challenging upbringing.
We're kind of looking at it from there's also I was just thinking about the flip side, about the people that are born that do horrible things because of their upbringings. Like I was just thinking about, we're talking about like the geniuses of the world, the Einsteins, the Newtons, the people who have done all these amazing things. But then you've got Hitler, then you've got Joseph Stalin. You've got people throughout history where you kind of, again, you never know in terms of that genetic lottery and how that's going to play out in whatever society that they're going to be brought into. So when we talk about valuing all life in terms of, you could get another Einstein, sure, but you could also get another Hitler. You could also get some. So it doesn't necessarily work. Yeah, it could go either way. The way I was thinking about it.
Cool. We are about time here, Thomas. Any other final thoughts you want to leave us on?
You know what? No, I'll flip the table, Dane. What final thoughts do you have to leave us with?
I think we covered a lot of cool ground today that I'm interested in. Hot topics we discussed. I think ultimately we agree that respect and having conversation between one another is extremely important. Without, I guess, jumping into the weeds, let's see what else. Humanity is no longer has passed the point in which reproduction is essential for our survival. I think we're all on the same page with that. And yeah.
Oh, Jeff, you got to close out your thoughts on Jeff.
There we go. Got to bring Jeff back into it. And Thomas is single-handedly going to stop every human on this planet from having sex. But mostly Jeff.
The ultimate cock block. A global cock block?
Global clock block.
Global clock block.
There you go, folks. Thomas, the global cock block.
Oh my goodness!
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, take care, folks.